So, the first 11 my greetings to you. Now, some of you are wondering why in this seat I am wearing this. Today I am suited because my trouser was very bad. I couldn't show it to you and myself. I worn a suit, for a change. I remember wondering why, and you did not dare to somehow. We maintain a distance, so you didn't ask me why I was wearing a coat in this heavy weather. I never know about roofs. Some of them are air-conditioned, some of them are not. And buildings, some of them are air-conditioned, some are. And very often in India, we don't know the difference between an air-conditioned accommodation and a mall. So you turn in temperature so cool that you people shiver. And I had experienced only a couple of weeks in Ahmedabad, where people come in a summer dress and half sleeves and in a hotel, Century Club in Ahmedabad. No, Century Club is here, Gymkhana Club there. And here is a very nice Century Club in Hyderabad, which makes a beautiful Michka salad. If you ever have a time to a friend who is a member of the club, then you should ask him or her to take you to Secunderabad Club. Yeah, it's very good. But anyway, you must love Michka salad, do you? Yes or no? Yes, that's very nice. So, and Gymkhana Club, there was no such thing. But there was heavy air conditioning. I met several people, some even older than myself, lo and behold, including Professor Makar Mehta, who is a great researcher in Gujarat history. And Bhikkhu Parekh, Lord Bhikkhu Parekh and I were performing. I was doing my usual bakwas, and he was performing, and suddenly they turned even the air conditioning more, thinking there are 100 people that must be warm. And then people started shivering. And somebody held his hand, but he could not. I want to speak. I want to speak. So you never know. And that's why I have worn this jacket. Now, Faith is going to start the session. He told me yesterday that most of you have not done environmental law. That environmental law is a subject that comes in the 4th year or something. And I said, why didn't you tell me before? Because yesterday I spoke of, and we didn't raise it, and did it? He didn't say anything. So I charged him by praising to say something about sustainable development and so on. But I have done it. That's very comfortable. But I have two clouds here. I have circulated the notes for today, and I squint when I look at the computer. A, because I like sweating. B, because I can't help it. Because I had a detachment of my left retina. And ever since then, there's not been a struggle to keep your eyes focused. But when I look at you, I do look at you. Let's face it. This is too big. I can't get it to follow size. Yesterday, when we talked about, yesterday we talked about, this is you've done already. What about today? You got today's thing? This is but here, on the top. You're putting yesterday's thing. Oh, it's the same thing, yeah, carry on. Yesterday we talked about many things, many concepts. We talked about precautionary principles, sustainable development, and many other ideas. We talked about 4 concepts that aspire to serve as the basic norm or good norm of international environmental law. Now, I do want to, by way of flow over, take a minute or two, or maybe 5 minutes, Before I hand over to Taji first, he is now come and will tell you what Siddhartha do in the course. But first thing I want to say is this, that we did not distinguish. You told me yesterday that you were doing the fourth year course, and most students don't have necessary information about constitutional laws, environmental law, right? We discussed in up the class, we told me distinctly that both students. So, and you agreed to say something about the concept, what I said yesterday. On the ground of the specialist. That's right. So I waited for you, but you were away, so you are here, I welcome you again, and you are welcome to come after at these two preliminary remarks. The first preliminary remark concerns, if I said you can't see.
I think this is not a comfortable arrangement. We had more free way of walking from the Yeah.
Not what happened now?
We fitted the table too close to the podium, so they've taken away your moving space. What else was
We did not distinguish yesterday sufficiently between what is called immanence and what is called unity and what is called transcendence. Immanence, retrospective or historical, and transcendent. When I go to my dentist, I don't go into often because it's a plaque. It says some pains are physical, some are mental, but a pain you can't really bear is called dental. Dental. I say, doctor, be transcendental. Transcend is a technique and treats me. So there is a transcendental. So there is a immanent is that which is given. Kyoto Protocol, Supreme Report, that is given, you can't do anything about it. It's there. You have to study it, or you don't have to study it, either way. It is there, it exists. Immanent is a criticism which is inside the thing. Any given thing. Rule of law, democracy, representation, all that idea. Is immanent. One way of analyzing a concept is to analyze it in terms of immanence. That is, it is given unto you and you are exploring it from the inside. When you are exploring it within the context, then you have this historical from the present or contemporaneous standpoint. History can be past or contemporary history. Or context. So contextual criticism. Immanent criticism, conceptual, historical criticism. And finally, transcendental criticism. That is, you rise not merely beyond your thing, but you look at the concept from outside, from the basis of first principle. There are three forms of criticism. And what I was doing with these four conceptions was a bit of context criticism, second, and bit of immanent criticism, what was there. But also when I used justice Kaju ultimately, it says nonsense, this is rubbish. Well, then I was doing transcendental criticism. Because outside the range, historical range, or outside the immanent thing is itself, military report, or precautionary principle, whatever you have. So this is very important. I believe you move from criticism to something called the critique. When do you move? When you go transcendental. You can do a thing in self-analysis, you are not transcending that thing. You can do a context-based analysis, you are not transcending, you are not going beyond the context. When you write a case comment, you write a case comment either by eminent criticism within the text, what is ratio, what's clear in circuit, etc. It's good prose, bad prose, does it explain itself. When you go to historical, it was the judgment given in Indira Gandhi's time, Vajpayee's time, Modi's time, political, social and political context. But transcendental is when you go to the first principle useful and look at the thing and say they think this can't be allowed. The expressor just asked me to write on corruption in public life, particularly with reference to Satikala case. He got a Valentine's gift from Justice Care children. And lo and behold, he has upheld the state of Karnataka and reversed the action and sent her for us to jail. So the governor doesn't have any way to do anything. He didn't do anything. He did not perform any job that is the job of the governor. My God, it is only job to ask the minister aspirant to take the floor test. That's all that the governors are meant for. Or become chancellor of some university. They have no particular function. So, you can look at K.S. judgment, I have not studied it, again, of public corruption from the thing within itself, from historical viewpoint and post-transcendent system point of view, first principle of jurisprudence of philosophy. When you move from criticism to critique, that's very important. And I was not critiquing these four concepts sufficiently. I was merely saying that permanent sovereignty of natural resources was how it was structured, how it was used by such words. I was going some more historical, similarly with sustainable development. Very rarely I approach the third level, so I was criticizing it, not critiquing it. Now, a contextual criticism of all the four principles of environmental law can be made on the ground of context. So if your context is Anthropocene and the world beyond that is waiting you, then you have very little use for these four concepts. So please distinguish the levels. That's the main preliminary point. The second preliminary point is what? A concept, by definition, is a normative complex. Right? It's a series of norms, nested with each other, knitted with each other, ideas, schemes for conduct, nested. You know the word nested? Concepts like legal concept, property, possession, personality, nested. They are nested things. They refer you to many things. Artificial personality and natural personality. In Anthropocene you ask whether objects in nature have personality. Whether a rock or whether trees are standing. A very monumental article by Christopher Stone done 25 years ago, entitled precisely, Do Trees Have Standing? And that marks, that article marks, and those is the word seminal, okay? Seminal comes from the word semen. And semen comes from the word testosterone. That is a physical process in male men. So when you use seminal, to describe the article as seminal, you are committing a sin against feminism. It will be a male chauvinist word. And women do that. And they're strong. Please write instead of seminal, germinal. Don't use the word seminal. The moment you use the word seminal, I know who you are. I don't have to read you, I know exactly where you send the word. You say in the word as made by men. And for men, male men. You don't come in the word of women. You terminal. So you told to the terminal article 40 years ago. You trees are then. Okay? Now, that was That was the beginning of American constitutional law, when the Supreme Court of America has done. So very often, this article, so very often you talk of normative complexes called concepts. Very often you call them, there is a difference that philosophers draw between concept and conceptions. The rule of law is a concept. Administrative law is a series of conceptions. We master concept. And from it follows these maxims of administrative law, or the term partem, whatever. Then namoid extra cosa, and things like that, or doctrine of public trust. They are conceptions which vary according to context. The concept stays more or less steady, like rule of law. The rule of law stays, but rule of law means many things in different contexts, and therefore you have different conceptions. Donald Dawkins, who is no more, is basing his whole theory on the distinction of law as concept and law as conception. So when you study, you can't understand Dawkins without going through his preliminary exposition of concept, difference between concept and conception. So in a sense, you, of course, Ronnie did never, I knew he was a philosopher, but he never consulted. I had plenty of time, so I did. I knew discipline, therefore I did. Metaphysics and philosophy and epistemology. I find huge literature on this distinction. They regularly draw a distinction between concept and conception. And they ask what is the concept, what is the conception. There is philosophical discourse. But Donald Dawkins got it without referring to philosophy into law. And I think it's important for you to grasp it. So, what was I saying? Now, speaking of the future, concepts speak to the future, to be. Conceptions crystallize it for now time, present time. So there are a number of ways of putting this distinction between concept and conceptions, okay? And I was talking about precaution, prevention, sustainable development, other things, permanent stability of natural resources. Was I speaking about concept or conceptions? They are related, but they are not the same. Did I make a khichdi of this, the involved of this distinction in my presentation? So you can look up at those and don't hesitate to tell me if I made a khichdi. Mili Judi Sarkar, khichdi. So if I made a khichdi, you tell me, and I'll go back over my notes and sort it out. But I think I instinctively observe the rough distinction between concept and conception. That's my feeling, but I'm entirely wrong. But I wanted to put this ahead before I get to the subject. So essentially, in talking about conceptions, you talk about how concepts are interpreted. Self-interpretation is the art of translating concepts into everyday happenings, norms, interpretation of concepts. Rule of law, hundreds of decisions on rule of law. There are thousands of obiter, millions of obiter rule of law, separation of powers. It's interpretation. And somewhere I use the word posthumously. They are posthumous. And somewhere, sometimes you find, even today, they speak of separation of powers, called the right and jealousy. So, concepts, however, conceptions have a limited lifetime. Interpretations change. Institutions change. Like the Supreme Court, they have changed. It's responded. Number of changes. The constitution has not gone overseas. So conceptions change. Concepts rarely undergo change. Concepts also change, but rarely. Flow, for example, is a pie in the sky. We refer to a normative complex nature, or separation of powers. So you must distinguish, my friend, between this. Now, do you have anything to say about yesterday? There is thing, Tony. Do you have anything to say about from your on what God said yesterday? Was it right? Was it wrong? Was it provocative? Was it dull? Was it good? Or was it bad?
It was provocative. I was speaking to you after the class, and we spoke about the fact that talking is right. And I was asking you maybe to speak about that to everyone. For example, permanent sovereignty over national resources fundamentally was a very good idea in the 1950s and 1960s when it first brought about a sea change in international observing the third world nations. But as we moved on and as we sort of saw in the context of political realities, we found that the rulers of these third world nations were largely using the resources that they had for their own personal needs. So a lot of these nations suffered through, and examples are multiple. So maybe you could speak about that, how you made this example, point to me that how aid is a normative idea and then how contextualizing it is entirely different. So maybe you could speak about that. I was basically questioning Mr. Baxi on how something like the permanent sovereignty of national resources could be a norm of international environmental law, because in the context of political realities, it hasn't quite given us the best that it could have. So I was more making a case for the other three, for us to look for a good norm in the other three, and Mr. Baxi had an answer to that.
Yeah. PSNR as a normative, as a concept, is responsible, as I said, for, with respect to Sundya, what's the last name? Pahuja. Sundya Pahuja wrote a book called Decolonizing International Law. And she and many others, including your assembly, have said that PSNR marks a transition between Westphalian law, that is law of the empire, international law as a law of family of civilized nations, to post-Westphalian legality, that is self-determination. Whole colonial, anti-colonial struggle is based on the principle of self-determination. Therefore, it was a breath of fresh air at that time. So you go into historical, contextual criticism. That at that time, it's a big leap forward. From the point of view of Anthropocene today, it's a retrogressive move. Because the up there at atmosphere emissions are not a function of sovereignty. Paris or the Kyoto Protocol says no. Each country has to bear the brunt of reducing emissions. They are not too much sovereignty. So today, after 6 years, it appears a different kind of, you can question the concept. But at that time, you're quite right, it was used heavily by the newly emerging nations. But as a concept, I gave you nobody reads that, that's why I gave you the 8 articles or 9 articles, and I urge you to read them again. This right belongs not merely to states, but to peoples of the state. Now it is true that most resource-rich global south countries like Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, and the Americas, and many others, Ghana, rich in some mineral, I forget, cocoa. So, Nauru, which was specialized in uranium, of course, offshore Australia. They use this money and resource as belonging to not to people, but to oligarchy. and they rest out the phenomenon of what I described as resource curse arrow. So, in the initial state, it was a revolutionary document, then became a prey for in the hands of oligarchs of the third world. They used the resources for themselves. And then it became a neo-colonial device. Not my friend, I never met him, but he's an intellectual friend, a great man of Ghana. He became his president. He was a colleague of Julius Nyerere. The Ghanaian president, what's his name? He said, he wrote a book on imperialism. And he poo-pooed Nkrumah. N-K-U-R-M-S. Nkrumah, or Nkrumah. Nkrumah said, call me Nkrumah. We in India call him Nkrumah. You can call him anything. And he is no more around. Like that. But you must know the spelling. Don't move like California. Nkrumah said that all this talk about post-coloniality is not justified. What you have is a transition from colonialism to neo-colonialism. You were never doing post-colonial is a task. We use the word post-colonial society. When Nkrumah is my guru. And what did he mean by neo-colonial? He said neo-colonial polity has two features. One, he said, is power without accountability. That is the first feature of neo-colonialism. Power without accountability. And second, he said, exploitation without redress. Exploitation without redress. And Nkrumah therefore said, show me a post-colonial nation in Africa. South Africa had not yet, it was the British rule. It became independent very late, it's its own constitution in 1986. Except with the exception of Botswana, it's always democratic, and held election, and changed its prime minister. No African nation stopped being neo-colonial. Is Indian constitution post-colonial or neo-colonial? I do not know, you better find out. You do your sums on that. I have views on that, but I keep them myself. So, our fundamental rights, neo-colonial, the part 3, neo-colonial or post-colonial. Does it mark a rupture with post-colonial or it marks continuity in history with the Rajas and emperors? We have to think about this question seriously. Post-colonial is a very good term that is used in literature for Salman Rushdie and people like that. But you cannot transfer a term of literature to analysis of state and law easily. You have to think whether you are post-colonial or neo-colonial. Or you are a mixture of both. Here post-colonial, there colonial. And from whose point of view are you post-colonial or neo-colonial? From the top, you may look post-colonial. Going up to UN, you may speak as post-colonial. From the farmer who commits suicide daily in Andhra, it's neo-colonial government. Nobody bothers. How many thousands of farmers have died, killed themselves? Why are they killing themselves? Because of Monsanto. Agribusiness corporation. I was a trial of Monsanto. I could not go because I was not well. In October of last year, in The Hague, and it's on the website. A tribunal held on Monsanto. And I was one of the judges, but I couldn't go. But they had done legal briefs, it's a legal trial, and asked Monsanto to appear. Monsanto is the worst possible corporation, multinational in the world today. There are other candidates rivaling Monsanto, like Rio Tinto or Syntesa in Switzerland, and so there in Germany, 6 or 7 corporations who virtually run a food dictatorship around the world. They control your seeds, they control your agricultural production. 7 multinational companies, agribusiness companies, control the food consumption, production, distribution, exchange. That's this conversation. Ministers might say anything, doesn't matter. Then, in fact, Monsanto ministers to buy them up, buy the whole 3 generations up. There's so much money. So, you can read that in the internet if you want to do some research. Agribusiness corporations are one of those things. So, essentially, who invited, how did the Green Revolution happen? I was saying in my writings in Bhopal, the lethal continuity between East India Company and Government of India. No constitution, but you could invite it because you wanted Green Revolution. For that you wanted chemicalization of agriculture. For that you wanted to ruin the earth by pesticides. Pesticides that worked were carbamates. Carbamates were in several ways, packaged in several ways, pesticides and insecticides. And union carbide produced pesticides and insecticides. So once we decided to have Green Revolution, Bhopal was a consequence. There is no a causal, it's not a causeless effect. It's a causal effect. No effect without a cause. That is continuity. There is equivalent there. This is what I said, and this is in print. There is a lethal continuity between the colonial and the post and the neo-colonial. Lethal. It kills people while they make profit. So this is PSNR has been abused, has been taken over, has been confiscated by some rulers and by multinationals. Pharmaceutical multinationals have also taken our PSNR. Nominally, sovereignty belongs to people and states. People are out or ousted, and sovereign becomes particular leader or group of leaders as support and real sovereigns are elsewhere. They are multinational. That's very well documented. So it is this that is lacking in legal education everywhere in India. We don't study. We study human rights. But human rights, multinational primary states, apply to us. They don't. So we don't study them. Why should multinationals not be bound by human rights obligations, by constitution? The question is really posed in the law schools. I don't know, it might be a different law school, but that's important. And a bit, if you time it. So that's why you're right. We moved from colonial to neo-colonial, instead of colonial to post-colonial. And then you move from colonial to neo-colonial, then you appropriate PSNR as a resource curse. The Indian Supreme Court has tried to reverse it in that way. Government wants a big judgment in the forest, and that's what Samtha case. It has tried to change things. And it has constantly upheld what is called people's sovereignty over legal sovereignty. It has found basis to say in the Constitution that legal sovereignty only makes sense when you hold power as a public trust. And why do you hold power as public trust? That's not in the rule of law, laissez-faire doctrine. It's here. You hold this in public trust because people are ultimate sovereign. And your sovereignty, your supremacy is to serve the people of India. The people are the ultimate sovereign. The state might be a legal sovereign. So they gave bold judgments on 5th and 6th schedule, on forest policy, on water, and they are very good judgments. One therefore should hesitate to follow Prof.Upendra by something like in criticizing the whole social litigation. But I wrote a big article in the Indian Express to which I had to reply, to which he replied, the State Baxi versus the Temple Masoon, to which I replied a letter with a small mistake he had made. I didn't reply to his substance. But you look at the discourse and you see what judges, can judges exercise popular sovereignty? That's the question today. And judges say we will. It's our constitutional duty. They might go wrong, and they do go wrong. They give very unpleasant decisions in the garb of political authority of the people. But overall, it is when the Baxi speak, Baxi Bhavan, what a number, 3 or 4, that it is the courts makes mistakes in print. Judgments are printed. By reasoning is printed, published. That's not the secret. Executive relies on secrecy. Legislature on walkouts, punctuated occasionally by debates. So you really have only one institution in this country to deliver whatever you may call democracy, that is the court. What we call democracy. That's my analysis. You may differ and you're welcome to tell me your views, but that's not, it's already half an hour. And I said 10 minutes in preliminary, but no, that was his point about problem solving. Today I wish to discuss basically how can we, Today we discuss, I basically discuss the KP. KP stands for Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol is a landmark agreement around 1994 or something. It came into force, however, in 2005 when Russia ratified it. And out of friendly pressure of yours, made available as much in advance, but it's only a few hours in advance, my notes. So you have them in your notes. I've changed them. I'll tell you when I've changed them, and you can query on that. But the question is, the broad question is about Paris Agreement, but you can't understand Paris Agreement without understanding Kyoto, and you can't understand Kyoto Protocol without understanding Rio Declaration. So that's a big journey and I won't undertake it. But I certainly we'll speak about Rio. Yesterday I spoke, I'll speak some more. But yesterday I talked of Rio in terms of precautionary principle, PP. Today I will talk in terms of another matter which is called CBDR, Common but Differentiated Responsibility Principle, CBDR, which that becomes to later. Kyoto is considered a relative success story compared with Climate Change Convention. Kyoto is considered less successful or not successful at all compared to Montreal Convention on ozone layer. And I have 7 features of that Carl Sunstein gives, written in my notes. There are 7 features. Why Kyoto Protocol did not succeed. what is the commonality between Kyoto, KP and Montreal? His conclusion is that KP did not succeed. At that time there was no Paris Treaty. He was comparing Montreal, the ozone layer, with KP. And he has 7 conclusions. They are common to both. And I don't want to read them, you have them in the notes. That both receive public recognition, both involve effects of emission from man-made technology. You got it now? You sent it out. So you got it. The third is both emit carbon dioxide, which stays for a long time in the atmosphere, 1,000 or more years. And it is well nigh irreversible, both ozone and climate change. The fourth is no nation can eliminate it by acting alone. You have to act in concert. So these are commonalities. And how you act in concert is a very big problem. How do you agree and how do you act without a common understanding and common sharing is a big problem, both with ozone and with Kyoto. The fifth and sixth are issues we'll discuss later. Fifth point as Satsang makes, I agree with him, that's why I gave him so much time, space, that one is the problem of international equity between global south and global north, and if I may add, between south in the north and north in the south. Because there are rich people here, billionaires. India is progressed because there's got how many billionaires? We are told by no less than a person, finance minister of India, and the beloved Prime Minister, of course, number of times, that we are billionaires. I think that it's 100 billionaires or more. So we are among the list of world billionaires, although university ranking is good, we may not feature among first 500. That's different. Billionaires, and these billionaires have not been founded universities. Right? India is a land of paradoxes. It's a lot of fun to study these paradoxes. Isn't it? So there it is. So fifth is problem of equity, which I divide as totally north and south, but south and north both combined, both together, not versus each other. Inequity prevails everywhere. And as I said last week in the South Asia University, I was heard as saying, please do not think of third world and first world. All countries of the world today are third world countries. There is only one world and it is third world. Politically, it is true. With Trump and British exit, and who will succeed in France and Germany, we know. Far right is coming to power. So, what is the first? There is no first world left anymore. We are all living in the third world. And from the Anthropocene standpoint, also we are all living in the third world. Geopolitically, we are living in the third world. And otherwise, we are living in the third world. So, I will study that problem of equity later in global justice area, and problem of intergenerational justice, that is paragraph 6, which is partly touched upon by saying we specialize in intergenerational justice. It's not a problem in India. We actually believe that we should not appoint the full complement of judges, that we should not appoint judges on time, we should starve our country of judicial officers, there should be as few as humanly possible, and be appointed as late as possible. So we believe and we practice those things. And therefore justice is always intergenerational. You fight today and your grandchildren will receive some. So it's not a big thing, but we practice it. We don't preach it. So whether India has any solutions to this problem of justice is a very interesting question we'll consider later. The seventh point is such that make it no longer true. It is true partly that the United States is supreme. It was supreme in Montreal Convention. And it reduced the aerosol production by 100% to ozone layer recovered by 50%. 50% is still emitted. And America persuaded EU also not to trade in ozone depleting substances. But now it is no longer true. But now with the issue implementation of Paris Accord in 2015, and with President Obama gone and President Trump in, who believes that climate change is a hoax. It's not scientifically proven. She's taking America backwards from Anthropocene. So it can't play a leading role. It belongs to EU, but if EU has cousins of Trump in power, they will also do the same. So there is a difficulty in predicting the political future. But we know the geological future, that the new era is upon us. And what can we do as lawyers is a troublesome question, and we'll discuss that later. And I'm sorry, the proofs are, it's not been proofed, the notes are, but I send them as they are. So there's some 10 here, I don't know what the 10 is doing there. So, we should now spend some time on KP. And the first question is, what did KP do? And I refer to not merely the Kyoto Protocol, but what amendments were carried out later in 2012 at Doha conference. The Kyoto Protocol from 2005 to 2012 is what we should try to be roughly familiar with before we come to Paris. What did the KP do? The detailed rules for this Kyoto were also approved by the Marrakesh Accord. It's known as the Marrakesh Accord. What it fundamentally did to change international IEL was to recognize Anthropocene veiled, and not so specifically, but as a reality. When it talked of greenhouse gases, for the first time, international instrument talk about GHG, greenhouse GHG. For the first time, you find an international treaty talking about emissions. And that was a progress. And Kyoto gave certain targets for reduction of emissions. And that was very good. It's, I've noted down, I won't repeat it in the notes, there are certain targets for developed countries, certain for developed countries. And the second thing that Kyoto did, and that's very important, was to establish an accounting mechanism between Annex A and Annex B parties. And that's very important because the words that Kyoto Protocol uses is historic justice, consideration of historic justice, a very major thing with Kyoto. Kyoto says that a matter of historic justice, we have to do two schedules. The developed countries who developed by bringing in heavy pollution of the atmosphere, the Industrial Revolution and thereafter, and they have a higher duty therefore to reduce emissions. That's a wonderful beginning that Kyoto made. And of course America was not a party to this convention. And Mr. Bush valiantly and constantly in parliament after parliament, by the Congress, Senate and House, constantly critiqued Kyoto. Because Kyoto put as in Schedule B the developing countries, which included India and China. India was then developing and a heavy polluter. And so was China. China was even more heavy polluter. But because of historical justice factor, they are put in Schedule B. So Kyoto enacted a hierarchy of emission control, which was a pretty mild word. And this hierarchy was an innovation. This hierarchy is gone in the Paris Agreement. I'll come to that if I have the time, or tomorrow. The third thing Kyoto did, and that was also wonderful, I think, very good, was to provide for emissions trading. And I particularly draw attention to Article 17 of KP, which says if you have units to spare, you can buy on open market emission units from those who have these units to spare. So developing countries have exhausted their quota and they can buy in open market certain types of emission quotas from the global south side, the next B countries. Now this is amazing. By mind boggles, I have a friend who in fact is responsible for the American professor in New York, Professor Stewart. Anything you find by him is worth reading. Professor Stewart, Richard Stewart. Richard told me once, he took me for lunch, I was at NYU teaching. And I said, who has invented this funny idea of emissions trading? And he said, Baxi, they call him Baxi. He said, you are lunching with him. He had invented this idea of carbon trade. And I then felt funny, but then I said, so what? I mean, it's very wrong. And he said, no, you must take interest. And I read all those articles, but I didn't understand very much. Obviously, he had a market rationality. That if you have exhausted your emission limit in Kyoto, and you want to produce some more of the earth, you can buy coupons from the third world, and you can produce. It's what a crazy idea. But Kyoto's rationality was not to limit emissions gradually, not totally. So he did not even peg at the level of 2%, which the Paris Convention does. He pegged this at 1995 level, which is nothing. By which time emissions had increased globally anyway to nearly to 400%. So Kyoto was an answer to full emission, but it created a market. And the first talk I gave, probably you remember, or synopsis I will send you, but first talk I had to send, I think. But if you consult your notes, I refer to post-politics, post-democracy, post-development, commodity fetish that prevails. And CO2 is a commodity. Kyoto makes it a commodity in market covered. You can buy and you can sell up to a limit. The arrangement was nice. You paid money to the third world, global south, and you put it with the planet. Because your quota was exhausted under the 95 limit. Everybody's quota was exhausted, but developing Schedule A, next A countries had exhausted it all. So it is commodification of nature and commodification of air pollution. Because you can't establish the market. You index the particular CO2 and track how many shares, how many coupons are sold and what. There is in fact an office of Accountant General under the Kyoto Protocol who kept track of how much carbon trading was. Now don't ask me too many questions if you can help it about carbon trading, because I've read a lot about it, including the latest issue which is on the net, and those of you who are interested can look at it. A recent issue by a firm named after the Secretary General of UN, the Hammarskjöld firm. And the whole issue is dedicated to what is called carbon trading. I've read it, I've written to the editor, but I can't frankly hold it in my head. It is so complex, and I'm not a trade person. So it is beyond me. Like I've heard, I drafted the definition of outsider trading in Australia. But I cannot tell you today what outsider trading means in India. Or like derivative, something called derivative market. I've tried to understand derivative. I can hold 4.5 seconds in my mind what derivatives are. And it is this what I was well before my stroke. Perfectly normal. I just couldn't hold it. So I don't have that kind of mind. If you know more about carbon trading, to a different mind, a better mind than mine, kindly tell me what carbon trading really means, how it operates. I only know the words. I've studied it, but I can't hold it in mind. It requires a lot of sustaining cost-benefit analysis and all that awareness and economics and mathematics. I don't have it. So please forgive me. But you can still ask me some general questions about carbon trading, and I'll be very happy to respond to it. But I must confess I know very little about it. I know a lot about it, but I can't hold it in my mind. All right. I now want to come to the bleeding heart of, what is the time? Is it right? Can't be. The bleeding heart of KP. The bleeding heart of KP is constituted by Rio Principle 7, which it incorporates in a differential manner. And this is very important from Paris. It will take some time. It is technical, but bear with me. In different contributions to global environmental protection, different countries have degraded the environment differently. States, this is very important, states have common but differentiated responsibilities. The developed countries acknowledge that responsibility that they bear, have hold a heart in the pursuit of sustainable development. Developing countries in the pursuit of sustainable development. Every word counts here, because the word of Rio is founding bedrock of international law, international environmental law, international pursuit of sustainable development. In view of the pressure that societies place on environment, technologies and financial resources, they combine. Now this is not, what I'm going to say is not in your notes, so I tell you what I have added. The question is, if you look at it like a lawyer, what does Article 7 of Rio say? The first I've already indicated when I stumbled, because it has brought sustainable development in. Now, Now? Yes, up here, up one more, up.
This is one.
Yeah, but I wanted to go to sustainable development. Sustainable development. In pursuit of sustainable development. So you must have an idea about sustainable development. The UN constantly reiterates ST. It reiterates PSNR. It reiterates precautionary principle. Precautionary principle become part of sustainable development. Mystery, miracle, whatever you call it. Or mass, whichever you call it. So, the whole world is wide open, although it's supposed to be regulated. What is sustainable development doing here? Except to give license to poison and pollute the planet. Because it is not recognized that sustainable development is not that. Sustainable development is not a license. In fact, there is no such thing as sustainable development, a contradiction between two words, sustainable and development. So, the theology of sustainable development is in theo, and therefore in KP. The second thing, which is I'm not putting on note, what does it mean to say in view of in view of the technologies, the demands of one, what does it mean? What does it mean to say in view of this technology and science research? Are you talking here in terms of the Indian directive principle? What does it say? The state shall take steps to test reform. State shall endeavor. And I think the third is enact or something. What does this mean? Do we lay down any concrete obligation? Take right to education, which is Article 21 now. What does it say? The state shall provide education to the limit of its economic capability. Who is to determine the economic capability? Are casual teachers permitted in primary and secondary school? Are primary and secondary school buildings to be in ramshackle condition? Are they to be miles away from my home where I have to touch and walk? Should they have bathroom or no bathroom, no joint bathroom or no bathroom, people defecate in public? And so on again. What is this right? We say this is the right. So what have we achieved by transferring it to rights section in the Constitution? If it is subject to economic capacity, which the state may determine, the state has number of priorities, education is not one of the priorities. Right? There is no simple as that. So is this formulation smacking of mere directive principle? I should know this. I'm trying to draw my this and for something together. But it is disturbing me. Thankful. It refuses to shut down like me. It's like my computer. It is my computer. So, shut it down. It refuses to shut down. That's me all over. To have no difference. So, it's important as lawyers to understand what does this principle lay down. Similarly, I have raised the question, I further raised the question, what happens to all this in Paris Convention? That will be discussed somewhat later. But now, why not now? In Paris Convention, in Paris, thank you very much. In Paris, you succeeded where I failed. That's a great compliment. In Paris Convention, the world historic injustice. In Paris 2015, that phrase does not appear. All the schedules are gone. Total schedules connect A, connect B countries. Trading among countries, carbon trade is gone. They would. Because of the context in which Paris, 2015 is different from 1995. When India and China claimed to be regional superpowers, when India was supposed to have a seat in Security Council UN, obviously you are a developing country by courtesy. You arrive. You are in G8, you are in Davos, you are everywhere, India goes in China goes. When China proclaims itself to be leader of the free world after Trump, or if the whole world is third world, where is the third world to be divided into connected? So, historic injustices or historic justice, consideration of historic justice are removed from that. But that part of Rio was adopted in Kyoto with historic justice, namely common and differentiated responsibility. I think it was Prakash, who was then the environmental minister and forest minister. He represented India in Paris. I think it's from 2 years ago, Paris 2015. He went to the final day, final. And now it's in full force, ratified. Paris was ratified very quickly. And Davdekar said, I'm very happy. The Paris Convention is full, littered with elements of principles of common He did not mind the omission of historical justice. So India and third world have accepted this as a fact. So long as there is common but different responsibility. It doesn't matter how it arose, how the thing arose, whether it's colonialism or imperialism or how. They were right. So Javadekar says, be a one. And Mr. Obama also says, she was not Great Britain, but now the Prime Minister. And that was it. Who? Man, made man. The Cameron, thank you. Cameron goes out by Obama says, the first word is because historically justice is more in Paris. And there was a big battle in Paris on this particular aspect, negotiations. The question was whether convention language should say shall or should. Whatever it is, assuming common different people. And ultimately language appears for should, not shall. Now scholars should know when you use shall, of course sometimes it doesn't mean may, but that's what the court to say. But shall does mean you are obligated. Should means you are obligated but in a very different sense, not an enforceable sense. You should do this. You are tied to principle sense. You should, they should endeavor, they should do this, they should have got the participate in my cause. I really am a dinosaur. I said, I'm not a dinosaur, yes, Bob, I really am very Who wants to participate in Ramakrishna's case, next Justice Venkatramaya said, I'm surprised an argument is ever made that labor should have anything to do with capital. Can't you read is there in the Supreme Court? the opinion by the professor. The labor has nothing to do with capital. And there was companies there which started when we wound up. There's a textile mill in Coimbatore which is wound up. Had secured unsecured creditors, a list of them. Section 439 of the then company. And Magdalena says, what kind of corporate mention? So he said, like a good lawyer, good corporate lawyer, some of you argue. You will argue. It will take money to argue. Take care of it. But this will not take care of it. That will be exaggerated. So he went to them and said, these are not, they have nothing to do with them. What has nothing to do? They are not listed as they sign it in a parody, take a different view, that's the speech. And Chinapaka, who was a very naughty man, he probably got the twinkle in his eye, he talked about Gandhian socialism. And anybody who moved away from socialism, not to and balance, was that person. He believed in a trust, property is a trust, amity between the capitalist and the laboring class. Chinapaka was Gandhian. But I'm not with that. I'll make up. And then there was another man whom I'm going to tell you. They were by Reza, Reza. And he said, what's not that? What? In fact, he literally owns the capital. The capitalists are later. It's all over. The real wealth is created by the Bazur and the Islam. So, we'll get back to it. And this particular thing is sounding like bioethics. My friend Lavanya Rajmani, my coach here, and Harold Winka, there's a Durban Conference of Environmental Ministers, COP conference on conference of parties. Regularly there are COPs. There's a conference of parties in Durban. And then next on to the idea of applicable to all. It's the before Paris Convention. And they asked, what does applicable to all mean? Pollution of atmosphere or atmospheric justice is a concern that is common concern. And yet, both KP and Rio talk about historic injustices. And Paris has elements of common but different responsibilities. As long as, and Javadekar said publicly, I said, I'm very happy, India is very happy, and you must be happy when he is happy, like your minister. He speaks on behalf of you all. He spoke on your behalf, and you don't even know it. Or same thing, he speaks on your behalf and you don't know it. What is all this? The minister binds you in Paris, and he says, I am happiest man today, because the whole thing is suffused with common but different responsibility. So I meet him someday, I think. You don't meet ministers as a principle, but sometimes bump into them. I ask him what he understands by common and what he understands by differentiated. This is known in scholarly literature, if we talk more about tomorrow, as differentiation. And differentiation is considered a principle of environmental or Anthropocene justice. It's very important for you to note it down. And these steps applicable to all. This, my friend Lavanya. Lavanya is in a book which he published by Cambridge. You should call sometime in your environment law class to speak about all this. So there's a book on CBDR, the big book. I welcome you, I urge you to read it. Published by Cambridge in 2013. And Lavanya is in Delhi, and she had written a lot about the Paris Convention and Kyoto Protocol. And she says, the applicable to all is a signal, the Anthropocene signal, that the general obligation to save the planet applies to all, whether you are rich or poor country, whether individual or whether you are community or whether you are state organization, or whether you are interregional organization or supranational organization or whatever. It applies to all. That is the exact phrase used by the all. And they say, Harvard, Winkler and Rajvani, Lavanya say, applicable, I quote, it's in their notes, applicable to all will be taken here to refer to this political signal, and this is an important word, in tension with differentiation. The political signal is in tension, dynamically played with differentiation, is relevant both to the contents of the agreement and its legal form. We realize the legal form of Paris that there will only be a time for tomorrow, if we have time. So, it is still common but different. It's a signal that is a common concern of humankind as a whole, and multi-species as a whole, and world as a whole, planet as a whole. Nobody is exempted. That is common to all of us owe a duty to prevent environmental degradation. You, I, our state, our region, our beloved prime ministers, and so on and so forth, right up to the UN. Everybody. Therefore, as I was coming in, I said my only contribution, Amita laughed her head off. That is true, my only contribution last time is that I had removed the trash cans. I told Ranbir Singh at that time, was the director of this place, he had penguins. And I love penguins, both the books and penguin as a bird. And I said to the Vice Chancellor, I'm not coming here, so Baxi Bhai is not coming here, you just come and you're going back. I said, I'm going back unless you promise me something. He said, what is it? I said, you can't have penguins put just as trash cans. People open, they put that trash there. And I suddenly noticed today, I told that it's my contribution, they stained it after all. Next time I came, I didn't notice it. But inveterate now, but I noticed more so because of Anthropocene justice. I noticed it clear. So there is some Anthropocene justice occurring at Nalsar also. Whether there should be trash cans is a question by itself. And what greenhouse gases do trash cans emit is a question also. And why can't you carry your own kachra in your own purse? Is a question. So climate change concerns us all, each individual, each region, each state, each country, transnational, international, all levels. And we'll come to that. Or we come to it now. But first now, so differentiation must be in service of some environmental goal. It can't be that you can differentiate between countries regardless of environmental goals, such as Lavanya, Rajbani and Winkler. And I agree with them. Now, as far as putting the trash in your purse or in your pocket, ultimately you dispose it off. I'm reminded of Henry Shue, who written a lot about what constitutes justice. He's written a lot about Shue, has written a lot about basic needs which you ought to read in human rights and law and poverty. The theory of what may constitute justice. The Henry Shue had turned his attention as an ethical philosopher to this question of anthropocene justice. And they developed a theory of just omissions. But I heard him say somewhere that, talking about mess, that parents all over the world educate their children not to make a mess, regardless of culture, Russia or China or India. I hope they do in India, but the big brother was a Swachha Abhiyan, so it's always up and down. Parents tend to educate the child, but there's Swachha Abhiyan also at national level. So let go. Keep Mera Bharat Mahan Swachh Rakho. And there's 2 pair of glasses belonging to Gandhi, I think. It's the Swachh Bharat campaign. You know that. I hope you contributed to it. But Jewish students at least. I was asked during Indira Gandhi's regime, in her name, to contribute a chapter to her book on her, Abhinandan Dant. And Moni Sir, was my vice chancellor, asked me to write, I was then the dean of the law school, and asked me to write on 10-point program. I said, I can write on 10-point program. Well, I can't write on 10-point program because it's Jewish students, it's Sanjay Gandhi. It's not in his bones, I said. I said, careful, careful. Shall not speak ill. At that time I was alive, but of the dead. So I was harassed by her minions to write a chapter. And see, the book would not go without my chapter, they said. And I must write, or else I was told. And I was 2 years old in India, and I was very terrified. So I had 2 young children. If they sent me to jail, they would be in a lot of trouble. But I didn't want to write, so I wrote to Indira Gandhi. When your minions are pressing me to write a chapter, and that letter must be somewhere in the faculty, register. I said, I can't possibly write on a subject. I've written my PhD on a subject which did not then exist, called Indian Private International Law. I have contributed articles in the Indian Law Institute. We don't have choice of law, we only jurisdiction issues. So technically we don't have a subject called Indian Private. I created it. So I said, I've tried very hard to find jurisprudence in your 20 points, and there is nothing. Everything is summed up in directive principles. And I've written on the subject, so please tell your minions not to bother me. And to her credit, I must say, after that, nobody dare approach me with the request to contribute to the Abhinandan Dant. So, a small victory here and there in my life, and I'm proud of it. Now, and ever since then I've been studying this Abhinandan Dant. I studied Babuji, Jagjivan Ram's Abhinandan Dant. It was a wonderful reading. Everybody pays high accolades to the university. Babuji was a great man. And Babuji's Abhinandan Dant, 250 pages, all full of tributes. Good railway minister, labor minister, Babuji was this, Babuji was that, and he was this and that, and that. I agree with him. Only half a page dealing with Babuji and untouchables. Untouchables and Babuji. And the only thing Babuji did was to do a Patit Udar Sangh. He was the president of Patit Udar Sangh. Bharatiya Patit Udar Sangh. Patit normally refers to sex workers, but he referred to untouchables. So nothing about Ambedkar and Babuji, nothing about Fuller and Babuji. So Abhinandan Dant I was reading. But let's go back finally to Kyoto. Henry Shue. Henry Shue says, just as parents teach their children, and children when they teach their parents, they teach their children and so on, Manage your own mess yourself. Don't pass it on to others, and certainly not to nature. That is the prescription. What do you do when you deal with collective entities, like states or corporations or universities? They are collective entities and there are no parents. Who are the parents of NASA? I mean, you can find a parent of Ambani empire, Dhirubhai Ambani, or Adani. You can find a parent, I don't know who it is. But you can't find a parent of Union Carbide. No apparent parent also. No parent, virtually no parent. What do you do with beings without parents? Where do they learn this sanskar to manage their mess? Shu's advice is very good. Large number of multinationals are parentless. They have never been taught not to waste the planet Earth. There are no parents to guide them. They are what the Buddhists call or Sanskrit call Swayambhu, self-manifesting. प्रकट हुए, बस प्रकट हुए तो भगवान बन गए. प्रकट हुए, स्वयंभू. Independent origination is what Buddhist philosophy says. Swayambhu is independent origination, without any father or mother. Or what Christians call, the Catholics say, immaculate conception. Immaculate conception. So, what do you do with immaculate conception? What do you do with beings of the state? Who is the parent of the state? I was asked by a very good labor lawyer, jurist, Alain Soupiot in France, and you must read Alain Soupiot's book, little book, 2012 on Charter of Philadelphia. It's a very good book on ILO, very good book. And Alain Soupiot was hot the collar when I spoke about my uncle Marx. At one point he said, Baxi, please stop. You refer to this Uncle Marx so often. Who is your father? And he expected me to say Mohandas Gandhi. I said, I have no father, I would be uncle. So a question fell flat. But if you don't have parents, he didn't ask me who was my mother, but told him. He asked my father. I would tell him. It's a patriarchal tyranny of sorts. He didn't ask me who was my sister. Karl Marx I called Uncle Mark, who was my father, and I refused to answer the question as a woman. Offensive question. Anyway, so there's a man, a very good man and a moral philosopher called David Gauthier, and he was teaching in Oxford. And David Gauthier said that corporations are corporations, oh my goodness, are moral free zones. No morality applies to corporations. No human rights apply to corporations. And that is true. If you study the Special Economic Zones Act of India, particularly the animal known as Development Commissioner. So I looked hopefully at this animal or being. I'm very fond of animals. I'm told there are some snakes in this place, and there are some birds which eat snakes, disorganized snakes, some very wild. But I've met plenty of snakes in the grass, so it doesn't really matter. Gauthier says, no morality excepting the morality the CEOs follow applies to corporations. They choose corporate voluntarism. And there's a man called Professor Jonathan Ruggie, who was a special rapporteur of the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. He wrote a series of reports saying precisely this, cooperate for this. I dealt with that in a recent article on Bhopal, full reference to these works and this idea. We fellows, some of us misguided fellows, worked very hard on the United Nations Convention, draft convention on the liability, human rights responsibility, liabilities of MNC. The whole draft was presented to the UN Secretary General and General Assembly. And Kofi Annan decided to appoint this man as a special rapporteur, and Kofi Annan appointed Jonathan Ruggie. And the very first thing that Ruggie wrote was this, and I quote, the UN draft norms on responsibilities of multinational corporations and human rights does not even deserve a third-class funeral. Went our labors in the OHR, papers up. Fortunately, the Human Rights Council now has adopted both our principles and recommended further work, and also Ruggie's framework, which is voluntarism of cooperation. And they are all referred to in my paper. That's why I refer to 2016, am I? Yes, it was mine in a journal to which I invite you to contribute. So this is a journal on which is very new, and I'm one of the trustees or advisory members of the editorial board. You're welcome to contribute to it. Right now we want to see issues and may turn more. But if you adopt this view, what happens to common but differentiated responsibility? Do corporations owe any responsibility for Anthropocene justice? They may find new technologies, alternate technologies. They may do the material work. They may turn around. Now, Exxon, which said climate change was a hoax, is now leading among corporations trying to invent new techniques for geoengineering. And that Exxon man is a secretary in the Trump administration now. He's the Secretary of Environment. He never ceases to surprise you. Trump, Mr. Trump, President Trump. So the question is not what common and differentiated responsibility means. That is a very important question. Of course, what it means, what is common and what is different matters, has been distributed in Paris Convention provisions. These questions matter. But I think the question that is never raised also matters. Never raised is the question of corporate liability at Anthropocene justice. Not what is the contribution to fighting Anthropocene, global warming and climate change. They will contribute, of course, to global warming and climate change fight if it brings them profits. That's not a question. And already you find major corporations in race to alternate energy, which is not polluted the earth, because that's where the money is. That's where green governance is, where you do not use carbon, fossil fuel. I'm talking in pre-Trump language. This is a different word altogether. I'm just still not adjusted to it. Who knows? When I was in Sydney last year, I found the Prime Minister saying, "You are not a good Australian if you don't support the coal industry." And I issued a press statement that I'm a visitor, but I'm Australian at heart because I spent my first teaching years in Australia, 10 years. I was teaching in Sydney. So I'm an honorary Australian. So I wrote, I said, I'm an honorary Australian, I'm wounded by your statement, I couldn't help it. In this day and age, you are saying coal is the least polluting industry. My God, you don't have to study Anthropocene justice to know that it's not, to know elementary common sense. But why do they say it? Because in Bihar, there is a white Australia company which mines the coal. Adani's empire runs on exporting coal in Australia. And if you've ever been a coal miner with a black lung, you realize how dangerous mining is. And when the pit is open, when you exhausted the coal and you don't fill the pit, children play. And how many children in Bihar lose their limb and life because the open coal finds is documented. But it doesn't matter to us. We invite them to dig more coal mines. If you like, there's a very brilliant novel by Grisham on Appalachian coal mining, strip mining mountains. You mine Sandmaster, you heard of, mine mountains. By exploding them, the bubbles of the mountain, and then taking the coal out of that. It's an extraordinary novel called I forget the title, it's a very recent book by John Grisham. It's a realistic novel. So in a sense, and here my bakwas, I say, is there any law in earth which applies to multinational corporations and ascribes the minimum code of conduct liability for saving the planet? I've gone on. I listen to you now. If you have any comments or queries, I should have done it earlier, but I got carried away by many outside stories which I should not have been carried away, but I got carried away. But essentially, Kyoto Convention, although it was not heavily subscribed by states, and although it promoted carbon market, was on the whole a step forward. Whether you can say the same about Paris Convention, and how far you can say it, we'll discuss tomorrow. But if there are any comments, or we are, yeah.
So one of the problems with this entire CGDR from a world perspective is that, so after Kyoto, from which the US obviously pulled out and Canada refused to be bound by it, but one of the big takeaways from Kyoto going into Paris was that the countries, like especially the EU, would stay within the Kyoto framework and agree to be bound by it. So the reason given by the United States for pulling out of Kyoto was that our rate of growth would be hampered if we are going for clean technologies to cut down emissions. But EU, so the first period commitment period is 2008-2013, and the EU not only matches its commitment, which was 8 to reduce 5%, it goes to 11%. And is also able to maintain a steady rate of growth. So this never finds any mention in the run-up to Paris, which is 2015. So the third world had 2 years to process that the argument being made by the United States to stay outside the Kyoto system is on evidence, not and we never made that argument. So that social contract that we entered into with the South entered into with the North in Kyoto, it comes to nothing, and we enter into a new social contract in 2015. So could you maybe build on that?
Well, as we will see, you are quite right. You're quite right. It is inscrutable. I might change his mind tomorrow. We don't know the term. But certainly it made noises, a lot of noises, of withdrawing from the Paris Convention. The EU bit was in the preparatory meetings. It was fully discussed in run-up to the Paris, how far it is reflected in Paris Convention, we'll see tomorrow. But if Britain, which was a major proponent of Paris Convention, under the British exit new dispensation, pulls out of the Paris Convention, if America actually enters denunciation of it, just Obama signed it and ratified, does not ratify the convention, or withdraws from the convention. And if some EU countries withdraw from the convention, then there will be a major setback, because I forgot to tell you that it's our framework convention. And what's the framework convention is different from a treaty which laid down specific obligation. A framework convention is found useful device. Rio for biodiversity. Many nations voluntarily followed Rio and biodiversity, like India, the Biodiversity Act. Many other countries did that. So a framework convention imposes a few obligations, but it's a kind of a roadmap for future state conduct, plus some pre-commitment, plus some goals which are stated as binding. So Paris is leading to what is called an Agenda 2030. So not merely have you to ratify the convention, but you have to develop further principles implementing Paris Convention in the national sphere. So first part of Paris ratification, at the time of ratification, every country had to declare NIDC, that is Nationally Intended Contribution, something called. So India said 1.5% in October 2 last year, and India ratified. So every country is a voluntary signpost up to the maximum of 2%. I don't think any country has gone that far, but some you might have. I'll check on that. Or everybody is 1.5 per part million. Pollution will stop to not 2. There actually is 400 million per part million in the air already, and they're talking of future. So that is the obligation, a minimum. And development of Paris Convention is now the next task, in which if they withdraw, if the developing countries in EU, England and US withdraw, will the rest of the world carry on with this framework? The threat will not be any less real and pressing. Threat will continue. So it is very difficult to say what will happen. But the Agenda 2030 will be our course, because it is the roti of UN international bureaucrats. I mean, you have international servants are the unsung heroes of Paris Agreement. They worked long nights for years on end to prepare agreement, and they will fight back. So not all civil service is bad. Some civil service is good. The international civil service in very many areas, what we in India used to call the steel frame, steel for ICS, steel frame. The steel frame is very sound, and so there will be some progress, but the progress will be affected, no doubt, by the willingness of the super-rich countries to be in the Paris Club. If they are out of it, the progress will happen, but progress will be slow. Perhaps infinitely so. I don't know. I have no crystal ball here. But in developing countries, if India and China reduce their emission rate progressively, and if developing countries, some of them even withdraw from Paris Convention, but reduce their emissions significantly at a national level, then Agenda 2030 would be real, whatever you put in it. In fact, we discuss tomorrow arguments against a world treaty. Jane McAdams' article is there, has written in the books in Manabatu and Kiribati in the Pacific Island. And then was the first voice saying, we don't need a Paris Convention. We don't need a Kyoto Convention. We should go bilateral and regional, not international, to fight this problem. And we'll revisit Jane McAdams' ideas tomorrow, if you have time. So maybe if Paris does not fructify, another leg will be bilateral. And our beloved Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has already, for example, cancelled all treaties, friendship, navigation and business treaties, MFC treaties, but proposed a model law for bilateral investment treaties. These other old treaties will continue till the model law is adopted, but they put the world community in notice that this is India's model law on investment. Now, if such model laws are generated elsewhere, America generated one. So if you go and if you have Anthropocene justice built into that, bilateral treaties and regional treaties are other avenues of hope. Not all is lost if we withdraw. Because the idea is, ideally, all nations should participate. But if they don't, no nation shall pollute. And not to pollute can go several routes. It does not do multilateral treaty, I think. But I also think the steel frame of the UN will find a way to continue. But I have no crystal ball. Might all come down to zero. Yes, ma'am.
This is, I mean, if there's more that you want to say,
no.
This is very different from, it's not an international environmental law. I was thinking about what you said relating to the models of MNCs or the absence of that, except maybe the bottom line. And tying up with what you said in your first lecture about the idea of compassion towards all beings, and perhaps the inability of the multinational corporation being an artificial entity to have that compassion. But one of the things that is constantly being discussed is the importance of the individual to since, well, the only function of the multinational corporation is to function within the market space, and that can be influenced by individuals or these collectives of individuals to push MNCs towards certain ethical practices through collective action, and individuals can be compassionate. But so I was having this conversation in the context of veganism and the modern animal industry, animal products industries across the globe, which are highly polluting as well as very cruel. And in the Indian context, it boils down to this tussle between livelihood and a moral position on the rights of animals. So whether it is in tanneries or whether it's a consumption of meat, it's particular communities always that are affected by any attempt to disrupt the marketplace. So I'm trying to understand, and this is just one example, but whether it's mining, and there have been protests by miners to keep mines open as well. So how do we think about the individuals that staff these corporations? The corporations are, especially at the lowest rungs, for whom sometimes the ethical practice that we might be speaking of could invite a disruption in their livelihood.
There are so many, thank you very much, there are so many strands in your questions. One is certain that there are some corporations, so they can rise to an occasion. For example, I don't really know it, there are two examples. Of a code of conduct, voluntary code of conduct for corporations. One was Sullivan Code, Reverend Sullivan in US, and other was Sean O'Connor in Ireland. These codes dealt with the practice of apartheid or regime of apartheid in South Africa. And they urged that no corporation should trade with country which practice institutionalized racial discrimination and apartheid. At that time, the Convention on Discrimination had not yet come. And at that time, apartheid was not considered an offense against humanity, as ICC now does. At that time, Israel was not accused of apartheid by the definition of discrimination against Palestinians, but now it stands accused. I just approved a report for the UN last week, a study, and I said UN should, what are the obligations of the UN system and the agency. South African apartheid was a particular kind, racial, but there can be other kinds of apartheid which are prohibited by discrimination convention. It was a very nice study, and I made my comment. So, in a short, almost all the American corporations desisted from doing business with South Africa. There is example of corporate social responsibility. But that dwarfs in comparison with the behavior of actual multinationals all around the world. Not that they are not capable of being moral, but they choose, the right word is not immoral, but amoral, beyond morals. They are amoral. And Milton Friedman, the great economist who won the Nobel Prize, in 1930s, he said, corporations do have a social responsibility, but only to investors and shareholders, not to public at large. We are not a social service organization. We have no responsibility to society at large. Responsibility to our investors. There are a handful of corporations which we counted on fingertips, which would include responsibility to labor. Very few. Classic case, the contrary is Walmart, which is coming to India now. Bharti Walmart is called. It completely discriminates against women, particularly in pregnant women, and so on. A very vicious character, that company. So, there is a word for this. The word is corporate Neanderthalism. Most corporates live in a Neanderthal world. And Neanderthal world there is no such thing as morality. Dog eat dog, man is man. So they are a different species. Forgive me if they are your parents or uncles, I don't mean personally anything, I just am describing corporation. Or if you're going to be a corporate lawyer, I don't mean unwell to you, I'm a friend of yours also. But I'm describing clinically the situation. There's a man called Warren Burger, before I come to animals. Warren Burger, who is a billionaire in America, multi-billionaire. His son is a somebody retired and smoking marijuana and an activist. So he, not all activists smoke marijuana, but he does. I mean, don't get me wrong. Don't smoke it if you pass on the campus at any rate. But he said his father, he had his father, Warren Buffett, talk of corporate philanthropy. Corporate philanthropy, conscious, I call it conscious money of corporations. We give some to the hospital and charity. Hardly 1%, less than 1% I don't know how Narayan Murthy, how much he gives in horses. But you say, so this Prince Peter Buffett told his father, and it came recently to my attention, he said in 2015, he said what Mr. Warren Buffett was talking about was not corporate philanthropy, but corporate colonialism. You own the British Empire, you own people, you own resources, you own territories, you own states. So colonization, philanthropic colonization was his word, not philanthropic, corporate philanthropy. On the question of animal rights, essay on animal rights, and I'm very friendly to this movement. Even when they use some violence. And I lost some friends in Cambridge because of animal rights terrorism, because they would not allow the scientists to experiment because there was cruelty, and they threatened these children going to school, because they terrorists in a broad sense. And poor man died as a result. I lost him, a good friend of mine, young scientist, because scientists like to research. And again, scientists are amoral. They are also like corporate beings, but animal rights people are very moral and even moralistic. So they don't observe the boundaries, the balance that must be observed in ethics. They don't consider prudence as virtue, so they go too far from that. But insofar as animal product industry contributes to greenhouse gases, Agenda 2030 will be one of the forums or one of the documents which I'm sure will consider it and consider in banning it. We have in our own country not merely duty, compassion and all that, in fundamental duties, but we have a series of tannery cases, in the Ganges tannery case, Kanpur, and the Supreme Court prohibited. And there the left, Govind Mukoti and many others, raised the same issue of employment versus environment. That's a very live trade-off consideration. So whether this would lead to proscription of ownership of animals, I'm not sure. Whether ways can be, technologies can be found that will make animals less of emitting greenhouse gases, animal meat and the way you prepare meat, where you cook it, is already under research. And we don't know how far it will go. And by animal I mean marine life, of those lobsters. I am a vegetarian. But vegetarians also kill plants. So one has to decide whether killing of plant is Anthropocene justice friendly or otherwise. Root, potato, kya khaya? Ab vegetarian hamida. You're vegetarian. Every time you eat potato, you probably emit greenhouse gases severally. I mean, not while eating it, cooking it, but otherwise also, digesting it, and producing solid waste. And solid waste does not discriminate in terms of animal waste and human waste. Human waste does not discriminate between what you ingest. So you're vegetarian or non-vegetarian, you emit greenhouse gases through solid waste, which is, so waste disposal matters a great deal. So there are lots of techniques and tarkeebs by which you can avoid a complete prohibition on animal products. But the most dangerous animal products, you can regulate. Like International Whaling Convention. It is absolutely out to kill a whale. Whale, in case you don't know, is our species, mammalian species, like you and me. And whale have a sense of speech, and whale have a brain, neuroreptilian brain which sends signals, whales can sing. So they are beautiful creatures. And there is the International Whaling Convention which prohibits. So regulation can move from prohibition to permission within varying ranges and new technology of eliminating anthropocene gases. So it's a complicated scenario. Whether corporations will behave differently, that is, they will incur losses, right? They incur losses because they want to avoid greenhouse gases is an open question. It's an open question. I don't think they would do so. But who am I? I mean, maybe CEOs will learn. Because they assert we are not social service organizations. We are corporations. We exist because we make profits. And we exist because profits are capital. And we plow back the rate of return into more capital. How does capitalism grow? Through invention and innovation. All these things before you, cell phone to computer. How did this happen? Every time you use a cell phone, remember the torture of Thai children and Chinese children whose hands are nimble, who assemble your cell phone and computer. The new technology has its cost, not just Anthropocene cost, the justice, social justice cost. And in some sense, the child labor is an irreversible cost. Every time you lit a firecracker, you think of Anthropocene justice. The pollution goes right up. That's only 400 per part billion today. But the atmosphere can only take less than 200 is the maximum part per million. They've doubled the quota already. So Supreme Court was quite right in coming down heavily on firecrackers, too little, too late, but symbolically perfectly okay. Because Supreme Court had no idea of Anthropocene justice, of course, but what they did was the pollution environment, old environmental law. Because Delhi had lots of smog, you can't breathe. Our daughter, I used to, Professor Baxi, is now a professor in JNU, but it's a different matter. She was a small girl going to Queen Mary's Convent, and there was a principal, Laha, of that convent, and she used to come in every class and said, "Girls, open the windows, let the climate come in." She didn't distinguish between weather and climate. And you walk out of my house in Delhi, you will find all the windows locked. You don't have any fresh air in Delhi. It's a health hazard to have fresh air in Delhi today. Because where I stay in East Delhi, its pollution and smog is among the highest in the world. So it's a health hazard at a certain vulnerability point to open your windows and let the climate come in. It should not let the climate come in. So there are problems of this nature. They keep on growing. And we don't take any notice of it. I hope we do. But you raise a very important concern. In environmental law, animal rights and environment are, and protection or degradation are very dialectically related. Sometimes the environmentalists win, sometimes the animal rights win. But the holistic picture is not available even for India, let alone for the world. Because there is something called dietary patterns and so on, and something called minority rights. And whether Anthropocene justice requires you to forget all this and come to a new formulation of justice is a question that I am raising, but I am not able to answer. Right? Okay? Anything else? Okay.
That's all.